بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أما بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. In last week's lesson we were looking at the story regarding Sayyidina Umar bin Khattab anhu's conversion to Islam. And I mentioned in last week's lesson the impact it had on the morale of the Muslims when Sayyidina Umar bin Khattab anhu converted to Islam, because Sayyidina Umar, he was an inspirational figure of Makkah. He was well respected, and as we looked at in last week's lesson, also well feared by Muslims, by non-Muslims, by the pagans. So when Sayyidina Umar anhu converted to Islam, he then opened the doors for people to openly preach about Islam, for people to openly worship and pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Before Umar anhu converted to Islam, no one, had the guts, you could say, to actually go to the haram, pray salah, pray namaz without being taunted, without being persecuted. But when Sayyidina Umar anhu converted to Islam, all the Sahabas, the weak, the poor, the rich, everyone was now able to go to the haram, pray namaz, and no one could do anything to that particular person. Also, by Sayyidina Umar anhu converting to Islam, he also led to other people coming to the fold of Islam without the fear of any reprisals, without the fear of any persecutions by the pagans of Makkah, by the mushrikeen. So Sayyidina Umar anhu's conversion to Islam did a lot, not just for the people who were Muslims at that time, i.e. the weak Sahabas, the Sahabas and so on, but also for people to convert to Islam. He opened the doors for a lot of good things to happen. Now let's look at the situation now. In Makkah you have a situation where people in their 10s and 20s every day converting to Islam. And the mushrikeen and the Quraysh, they were witnessing all these things. They were seeing that, look, Muslims were now easily, freely converting to Islam, freely praying and worshipping and preaching. People were now easily converting to Islam. There was no fear of any retribution, no fear of any consequences. So the pagans of Makkah, the Quraysh leaders, their chiefs, their tribes, they got together and they thought to themselves that, what can we do now? We've tried all the plans, we've gone through all the strategies to stop people converting to Islam. And as you know, those of you who've been here from the very beginning will know that we talked about so many of their strategies to stop people converting to Islam. They firstly targeted Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, tried to tempt him with wealth and women and money. They started then persecuting Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, persecuting the companions. So many things, but it all failed. Why? Because people were still converting to Islam. And now what was happening, the tide was changing in terms of a great figure like Umar anhu, and what we read before, Hazrat Hamza anhu converting to Islam, two warriors. They were known as warriors even before Islam, for their bravery, for their courage. They now converted to Islam, so they could now see a total kind of overhaul of their religion. So they got together, they were looking at some strategies, some plans, and they came up with a strategy or a plan to stop people converting to Islam, to harm the Muslims and the Sahabas, which was even more horrendous, even more oppressive than what they were doing before. And the plan or the strategy they came up with was that they were going to financially and socially boycott the Muslims. That they were not going to sell anything to the Muslims. No one was allowed to buy anything from Muslims. No one was allowed to buy or sell from those who helped and assisted the Muslims. No one was allowed to give them any food. No one was allowed to give them any water. No girl or daughter from another tribe was allowed to marry them. No son was allowed to marry them. So this is known as the social boycott, the financial boycott carried out by the tribes of the Quraysh against the Muslims and also against those who assisted the Muslims. Now the people who assisted the Muslims at that time were the Banu Hashim and the Banu Muttalib. Banu Hashim, the leader, was Abu Talib, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's uncle. He wasn't a Muslim, but he assisted, like he helped Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So they said, okay, we will also boycott them as well. So no one is allowed to buy anything from them. No one is allowed to sell anything to them. Any caravans of food or pile of food which goes past Mecca, they are not allowed to go to the Muslims and sell anything to them. So this was the social boycott and the treaty, or you could say the conditions they came up with. Now it's mentioned that when the leaders of the Quraysh, when they sat together to write this particular treaty and these conditions out, there was a person whose name was Mansur bin Ikramah, and he wrote these conditions out. But because these conditions were so oppressive, that it mentioned that as soon as he finished writing these conditions out, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala there and there punished him. And the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala punished him was Allah made his fingers go paralyzed. And he wasn't able to ever write again until he died. Now, I was saying that this particular social boycott lasted for 3 years. And the saddest thing is that it's mentioned in the books of Seerah and also in the Hadith as well, that the Muslims, they had to leave Mecca. So not only they didn't do any kind of tijara, any kind of buying and selling, also they forced the Muslims to leave Mecca and go to a nearby valley, and they had to live there. So the Muslims, they were living there also. The Banu Hashim, they were there, even though not all of them were Muslims. Banu Muttalib, even though they were not Muslims, all of them, but because of assisting Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because of that family honor and izzat, they also left Mecca to be with the Muslims. And what would happen is that there would sometimes be babies crying in this valley. Young babies, young boys and girls, they would be crying for food. And instead of having any kind of pity, the Quraysh, they would listen to all the crying of the babies, the weeping of young children, because for days and days there's no food, they're not eating anything. So they would listen to the weeping, they would listen to the cry, but instead of having any pity for them, they would actually start laughing and start cheering that, look at the Muslims, they're crying for food and so on. So this was the torture they were going through. And when you look at it, and when we look at this particular story, you could realize how hard Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made their hearts. Because of their kufr, because of their shirk, their hearts became so black that Allah took out compassion from them. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took out mercy and raham from them, that they would see babies crying to death, and instead of having any kind of pity for them, they would start laughing and joking and cheering. Even though they say there's someone who you don't like, you say there's an enemy of yours, even then no one would wish for that enemy to die in such a way, die out of hunger. But this is what they were doing. And instead of having any kind of sadness or any kind of guilt, sometimes we do something wrong, but we have that guilt and we think, we're a bit harsh on that brother, harsh on that sister, a bit over the top here with this particular person. But we have that kind of remorse or guilt in our hearts. But these people, because Allah had blackened their hearts, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took that thing out of them. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took that remorse out of them. And I did mention this as well before, that when you look at it, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts a zeal over someone's heart, that in itself is a great azab and is a great punishment of this dunya. Forget about Allah, paralyzing your fingers like Allah did with Mansur bin Ikrimah or other kind of punishment. The severest punishment a person can have in this dunya is Allah putting a zeal over your heart, that you are unable to have any pity for someone, you are unable to have some grief or guilt or remorse of any bad things, of your bad actions, that in itself is a great azab and a great punishment. And this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did to them, that they saw Muslims crying, they saw babies dying out of hunger, but they didn't do anything to them. And if you remember this point, that nations or people, it can survive through kufr and shirk, but it cannot survive when it starts doing zulm and oppression over its people. What I'm trying to say is that countries in this dunya, many of them are non-believing countries, they'll survive. Allah won't punish them in this dunya. They could survive through kufr and shirk. However, when they start going beyond the limit, start doing zulm, start doing oppression, that's when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's azab and punishment comes. So this is what, and this eventually happened to them later on in the Battle of Badr, when many of these people who vetoed this particular agreement, like Abu Jahl, Abu Lahab, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, destroyed them during the Battle of Badr and before. We look at that later. So as I was saying that these people, they would hear the babies crying, they would hear the babies weeping, young children crying for food, but they would not have any pity for them. And it's mentioned that, for days and days, the Muslims, they would not have any food. There's a story, a narration of Hazrat Sa'd bin Abi Waqqas anhu, that the way he survived was once he came across some skin, some kind of dry skin of camel. Camels the same way like we sometimes shred skin. Camels and animals, they also shred skin as well. So there was a shredded camel skin. So it's mentioned that he picked this camel skin up, he washed it with water, he then kind of roasted it on some fire, and then he gulped it down with water. So this is what Hazrat Sa'd bin Abi Waqqas was surviving on, shredded camel skin. So you can imagine, if Hazrat Sa'd bin Abi Waqqas was surviving on that, you can imagine some other Sahabas, what they were surviving on. There was like leaves and, stones, these kind of things, a few berries here and there, a few grains they may have found. They were surviving on that. And this was not going for a few days, by the way. This happened for 3 years. This particular climate, or this boycott happened for 3 years. So this is what the Muslims were going through. Now, one good thing about hidayat and misguidance is that it's all down to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Some people, they may be non-believers, they may not be believing in Islam and Allah, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala still may give them tawfiq of hidayat and guidance. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would not take that compassion and that mercy out. And it was in Makkah, there was a person whose name was Hisham bin Amr, who later converted to Islam, but he was the very first person who had the pity for the Muslims. And it's mentioned in the books of Seerah that once he was eating, he was in Makkah, he was having all this nice delicious food in front of him, and then he realized that his brothers and sisters who were Muslims living in this valley, they had no food. So what he did was that then and there he got a sack of rice, he then put it on his camel, and then he took the camel to the Muslims, and then the Muslims were able to eat from the sack of rice and the sack of grain. And this is how the Muslims were surviving. They had a few people, they weren't supposed to, but what they did was secretly they were kind of passing food to the Muslims, sacks of rice here and there, sacks of grain here and there, sacks of dates here and there, and like on the rice, on the grain, on the dates, this is how the Muslims were surviving on. So Hisham bin Amr, as I was saying, he was the very first person to realize that what the Quraysh were doing was something totally wrong. So he then went to another person whose name was Zuhair bin Umayyah, who happened to be the cousin of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he explained to him that, look, what we're doing is wrong. This is like total oppression. How can we live in Makkah here, eating the nice delicious food where our brothers and sisters, not in terms of Muslim brothers and sisters, but our tribal brothers and sisters are in this valley, and they're just surviving on grain, they're surviving on leaves, as in the case of Hazrat Sa'd bin Waqqas who's surviving on camel skin. How can we eat these beautiful food, these delicious food, and all these things are happening. So they then got together, and then they got a group of 5 people who kind of agreed and confirmed with them that, look, what we're doing is something wrong. So what happened was that the next day, there was a meeting with the Quraysh leaders, and these 5 people, they raised this issue in front of them, and they said that, look, this is something which is totally wrong. This is good. How can we do this to our tribal brothers and sisters? Now Abu Jahl, and we've already talked about Abu Jahl before, he stood up and he said that, no, we're not going to change this particular treaty. The conditions which we have set, we are going to remain steadfast on that. Now in the meantime, Abu Talib was the uncle of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Remember, he was also in the valley as well, but he was there because he was supporting Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam went to Abu Talib and he said to Abu Talib that, I've seen a vision, I've seen a dream, that the treaty or the paper on which the conditions were written, that we are not going to do this, we are going to do this against the Muslims, and which was then stuck on the wall of the Kaaba. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said to Abu Talib that I had a vision that ants have started eating the treaty and the paper up. And these termites, we call them, they started nibbling at the paper, and besides the word Allahumma and Bismillah. Now remember, Bismillah Allahumma means, oh Allah, Bismillah means in the name of Allah. Even the pagans in those days, they would start any letter with Bismillah and Allahumma. So besides these 2 words, so these were the words of Allah, everything else of the treaty has been eaten by these ants. So Abu Talib, realizing that this, what they were doing is something wrong, and this has to be from Allah, that's why ants have started nibbling at the paper, he then went to Abu Jahl, he then went to the Quraysh leaders, and he said that, look, my nephew, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, has seen this dream. Now, if we go and look at the paper, and if what Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said is true, or the ants have eaten it up, then that means that this boycott which you are doing against us is on zulm, is based on oppression, it's wrong, and you have to stop it. However, if we go and we see that the paper is still there, then that means that obviously my nephew is on the wrong, and then I will hand Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam over to you, and you can do whatever you want with it. So when the Quraysh heard this from Abu Talib, they said, okay, this is a good condition, we'll go and check it out. So when they went to see the paper, they then saw what Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam predicted in terms of all the paper had been eaten up by ants, and only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's name remained. So then they realized that what they had done for 3 years has been zulm, has been oppression. So they then gave up, they broke the treaty, and they said that the Muslims, you're able to come back and we will start trading with you again, we will start doing business with you again. And it's also mentioned that when the boycott finished, Abu Talib, he then went into the Haram. Remember, Abu Talib is not a believer, he's not a Muslim, but he went into the Haram and then he prayed for destruction for the Quraysh and against those who did that against them and against the Muslims. It's mentioned that he prayed to God. It doesn't actually say like whether it was with the idols or whether it was Allah, but he prayed to a God, and he basically prayed for retaliation against those people who did these things against the Banu Hashim and against the Muslims. So what we can gather from this particular story and the boycott, again, continuing with the theme which I've started many weeks before, the difficulties the Sahabas and the companions went to convey the message of Islam. So, looking back at the struggle Rasulullah went through, the mujahada the companions went through, the very least, it's nothing too much to ask, but the very least what we as Muslims should do is abide by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's words in the Holy Quran, and abide by the Sunnah and the ways of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam isn't that we just act upon some parts of the Sunnah and leave the other behind. It means that for every single thing, we act upon what Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam wanted and what Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had said. So people think, okay, I've got a beard and I wear a topi and a jubba, I've done the sunnah. No, sunnah is that everything, internally and externally, following the laws and following the blessed words of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So this is what the seerah is about. That's why it's so important to learn about the seerah, is that it kind of makes our iman fresh. It's good to know about the struggle Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam went through, so that we can actually value iman. We can value, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We can value our religion. It's like, for example, somebody's done a degree. Now, if somebody's done a degree, spent 3-4 years doing the degree, he did all the dissertations, the coursework and so on. At the end, when he passes, he values it. Why? Because he actually went through a lot to get this particular degree. So exactly as well, we received this deen from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, from the Sahabas, but look at the effort, the mujahada and the struggle the Sahabas went through. And that's one of the tawfiq to act upon. And also, go through the mujahada in practicing our religion, our deen. For akhir da'wan, alhamdulillah.